Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as you know, we're rapidly urbanizing the planet. They're saying by 2050, perhaps 80% of the world's population will be living in urban areas, maybe as few as 300 to 500 urban centers having most of the population of the planet. By then, it's estimated to be 9 billion people. Yes, 9 billion people. And so how are we going to provide the food, the fuel, the fiber, and to take care of the infrastructure? And we have someone sitting right behind me that's looking at this from a little different perspective than many people doing as far as looking at governments and how they're going to be addressing this for their various individual populations, but really looking at it across the globe as far as a world economic and environmental system and how to engage and empower the individual and the private sector and everything that's going to be going on. Her name is Haydee Celaya. She's the co-founder of AvanzCapital. And Haydee, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you, Sam, very much, and thank you for inviting me.
I'm really glad you're here. Tell us about this very interesting name that you have for your organization, and then we're going to talk a little bit about your organization, but then we're going to get into the dynamics of population change and climate and all these other issues.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity. AvanzCapital originates from the Spanish word avanza, and avanza means to move forward. And so we're an organization that really set up to take advantage of the forward movement of the emerging world. We were established in 2010. My colleague Haydee and I left the International Finance Corporation, which is part of the World Bank Group. We were there for many years promoting private investment in emerging and frontier markets. And we saw an opportunity to help investors across the world, both investors in the US, Europe, and also investors in emerging markets who are looking at taking advantage of growth and opportunity in emerging and frontier markets.
And looking at this is really interesting, but it's also very exciting at the same time that you're looking again at investors. Many people are looking at, governments, they're looking at some supernatural bodies that are going to be doing this investing and trying to bring about development. But you're saying really in the private sector is where the engine of growth, the real energy is there. So what made you decide you wanted to go out and focus really in an entirely different way than how most development theory has evolved over the last 50 to 70 years?
So I've been in the development finance business for 30 years, really, and was at the IFC for 20-some years. IFC does focus on private sector development in emerging markets. So in AvanzCapital, we are firm believers that the engine of growth, as you said, is the private sector in emerging markets. It is the part of the economy that will create the jobs for that growing population that we see has been, since I was a kid, from 2 billion people, today 7 billion people, going to 9. And as we see in the graph that you are showing, the population growth is really primarily going to happen in emerging and frontier markets.
Let's bring this slide up so we can have a full view of this, because I think this is very important, Haydee, to what it is that we're talking about. If we can get that, there we go, full slide. So just tell us what we're looking at here and what is the dynamic of this?
What you're seeing here is that there's an overall growth in the world population, but the population of the United States is relatively flat. The population in Europe is somewhat declining. Countries like Japan are also declining. But the big jump in population growth you see there, particularly in the case of Africa, there's a boom going on. And it's not just the population numbers itself, it's also the demographics and the kinds of population that you're going to see emerging in these countries?
Well, looking at the demographics, I know this is something that we're talking about is the populations in many of these countries. The percentage is becoming younger and younger all the time, where then you have a very dynamic society like China. It's actually the most rapidly aging population on the planet. And this is something that people don't really realize, that you got 1.3 billion people. But again, the acceleration of age in that area of how they're going to be able to fund and manage their economy in the future. Yet Africa is really, it's almost like it's poised to gallop forward into the future. How do we balance that, Haydee, so that we look at it and we truly understand the dynamics, not just of what it is right now, but where we're going to be, say, 5, 10, 15 years from now?
So, emerging markets, a lot of people talk about emerging markets as like one big part of the world, but as we know, there are many, many countries, there are multiple regions, and each one's a slightly different dynamic. So I think it's very interesting that you flagged the fact that in China, the population is kind of an aging population now, because that presents a different investment opportunities for people looking to invest in China as opposed to Africa. But I think the overall theme in emerging and frontier markets is the young population. Okay, China maybe being the exception. The young population that is better educated, that is looking for a better lifestyle. And this population is demanding new products, new services, new freedoms from their government. So this is driving a lot of the changes that you're seeing in emerging markets, many and most, I believe, which are very positive. And as an investor, we have to understand the dynamics and the transformation that's happening in these economies in order to find the right investment opportunities.
Well, looking at this, I wanted to bring this up, and you and I have been talking about this before we even came on the program, but this dynamic as far as urbanization and the impact on the world is that the population is moving at a very rapid rate into these urban areas. And it doesn't matter whether it's Liberia, it's Libya, whatever country it is around the globe, the same dynamic is going on. China and India are classic examples, but Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia are going through that same dynamic. What is urbanization doing as far as the economy? And then by extension, what is that doing as far as the investors and what they're looking at and what may be the future for them?
So, with the young population looking for better life, jobs, they will move to the cities. Okay, hence this drive towards urbanization. One of the realities about urbanization is that it increases levels of income. When you're increasing levels of income, jobs, and building ecosystems for better businesses, you are growing the middle class. And you have evidence today of a growing middle class, a growing number of consumers, which is driving the growth and development of a lot of these economies. So just 2 data points. In the case of China, right, in a 15-year period from 1990 to 2005, China started with 175 million middle-class consumers. By 2005, China had 800 million middle-class consumers. If you think about the fact that the US total population is about 300 and a little bit more people, okay, you see that China generated 2.5 the US population just in middle-class consumers. India went from 150 million, same time frame, to about 265 million. So that's over 1 billion middle-class consumers just in China and India alone.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And then you have the rest.
Yeah, it's
right?
amazing. You have 2 countries out of, the 196 plus or minus that's recognized by the UN helping to drive the world economy. But then you come right behind that with Africa, which now is going to almost 1 billion people by 2020. And all of a sudden you have a whole new dynamic on the whole African continent of the 54 nations. And then you look at Southeast Asia, where almost, except for a few cases, they're all rising about the same time into, this middle income state. So what are we seeing if you have this golden arch? You come Africa, Southeast Asia, down into Latin America. What are we looking at there?
Well, let me just make another observation on Africa, because this whole urbanization story is very, very important for Africa.
Absolutely.
The developed world, North America, is about 81% population living in urban areas. Africa is only about 40% of the African population living in urban areas. So when you combine the expected growth and the expected urbanization in Africa, you can see that the African consumer story is really what's driving the growth and the opportunities in the African continent. So it's no longer natural resources, was the old story in Africa. Now it's really about the consumer.
Yeah, and also too, this whole thing, and we'll go back to that and then move to this next slide, it's where you're really bringing in power, water, food, basic infrastructure, healthcare, education. So when you have these massive investments across these 54 nations, even though you have, still warring states going on like the Congo, DRC, South Sudan, North Sudan, in general, the African continent is really poised to, really move forward, as we go towards 2050.
It's really the concept of leapfrogging. I'm sure you've heard that in some of the terminology. How does a country or region leapfrog, not just in technology, but in its development stage? And I think Africa is very much poised for that. One of the developments in terms, and you mentioned conflict in Congo, right? Africa has overall really stabilized. Okay, there's still things happen. Okay, but that's expected in any growing and stabilizing democracy. But Africa, if it had in the 1980s, pretty much governed by dictators, at the end of the 80s, it had 3 democracies. By 2008, 2009, it had 23 democracies, and it's had now countries where elections have gone smoothly, and this political change in Africa has driven a lot of the reforms and things that are needed to set the stage for the private sector to start operating more effectively to serve that growing population.
We never allow enough time to get through all these topics.
Sorry.
So, no, that was just going to say, no, we're going to come back. No, this is absolutely fantastic. 15 seconds, where do you think we're going over the next 5, 10, to 15 years?
Well, it is
15 seconds.
It is a rocky up and down, okay? But I think the trend is certainly positive, and the trend across all of the emerging markets, I think, is very good.
Well, we're going to go out on the slide we have here as far as the emerging middle class, because this really is the theme of where we're going over the next 20 or 30 years as we move forward. And that has the impact on the environment, has impact on the economy, civil society development, as we create the Emerald Planet.
Some dreams are universal. Dreams that inspire us. Multiple sclerosis is a devastating disease that changes lives forever. The National MS Society does more for people with MS than any organization in the world. But we can't do it alone. To get involved, visit us online at nationalmssociety.org or call 1-800-FIGHT-MS. This is why we're here. Because nobody dreams of having multiple sclerosis.
What's wrong with this picture? Half of young Americans can't locate economic powers like Japan and India. 20% can't even find the Pacific Ocean. Without geography, our children aren't ready for the world. Geography is everywhere. It's incredible creatures, rhythm, fashion, flavor. It's economics and politics. It's change. Understanding connections between people and places is critical in the 21st century. That's why we created mywonderfulworld.org. Go there now for your free parent and teacher action kits and give our kids the power of global knowledge. Because kids who understand our world today can succeed in it tomorrow.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from the United States, Washington, D.C., as we look around the globe for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products, and of course the people are making a difference as we move towards 2050. And as we go with a planet that moves from a little over 7 billion people to 9 billion, how are we going to accommodate 2 billion new people so that they're not just existing on the planet, but actually are having a higher quality of life with the education, the health care, and all the basic infrastructure that they need? And so we need to engage every sector of society. Much of the emphasis has been on governments and supernatural bodies like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, the United Nations, and others. But more and more, the private sector is getting involved, and private investors are shouldering much of this as far as putting in basic infrastructure, as far as roads, ports, airports, and many other things. And we have someone who has really been leading the band in all this. Her name is Haydee Celaya. She is co-founder of AvanzCapital. Haydee, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you again. Thank you very much.
Glad to have you here. And you have a very interesting name, but I know that in really moving forward, you created something before you even started that was international. Why the international focus? And then again, let's define the name because that fits perfectly in what we're going to be talking about over these next few minutes.
For AvanzCapital, you mean?
Right.
So AvanzCapital originated with the word avanza in Spanish, which means moving forward. And it really captures the spirit of the future of the world and the growth in emerging and developing economies as they become a bigger part of our planet. And so,
now looking at your logo, I told you I really like the color combination and really the energy of that. What is the emblems here, and how does all this fit again back to the international?
So our business is really to invest in private equity in emerging markets. So we invest through backing fund managers and private equity opportunities that we see across all of the emerging markets, or a key number of emerging markets.
Right.
And our symbol that you see there that looks they're essentially J-curves, right? The swoosh are essentially J-curves, which are symbolic of private equity investing.
Right, and we talked about the color scheme and the different people.
We like the gold in particular.
In the organization, all that. But you started off, you're in the United States, Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and then also Hong Kong. Why this mix as far as Middle East, North America, and of course in the Southeast Asia? So
the firm really focuses in 3 key regions. We like very much emerging Asia, hence we have an office in Hong Kong. We like very much Africa, sub-Saharan Africa as well as North Africa. And our office in Dubai is, from a logistics perspective, a very, very good location. And then we cover Latin America. And so being in the Washington, D.C. area allows us to be close to the international organizations that we know well, the IFC, World Bank, et cetera, as well as covering Latin America from here.
Now looking at this slide, this really almost encapsulates what's going on worldwide as far as this emerging middle class. And if you look at China, India, Brazil, Russia, South Africa, many of these countries that, some of the BRICS type nations, is that the middle class really is emerging and almost across the globe and all the different continents. And so what is the dynamic of that? And then how does these investors that you're talking about, that you're working with, really fit in to shoulder some of the responsibility, but at the same time act as a catalyst for this investment that's taking us towards 2050?
So the way we're looking at these markets is really to help our investors get a diversified portfolio across a number of markets. Diversification is a very good way to cover your downside. You do have the dynamics of the consumer across all the markets. But these can be volatile economies. Things can happen in one region or another, and you want to be able to balance out your risk, right? So some of the ways that we are able to do that for our investors is to really build a portfolio for them. That includes very good opportunities in Asia, whether it's China or one of the smaller economies, also in Africa and in Latin America. And we do that across a number of sectors. Okay.
Well, looking at what you're doing, this whole thing of income inequality, kind of keeps rearing its head, whether you're talking about, Russia, China, India, South Africa, again, going back to these BRICS nations now, even going into a place like Vietnam, Thailand, some of these countries. So how is that shaping and molding public opinion, and how is that shaping and molding where investors feel comfortable to go? Or are they saying, we see the dynamic of Africa, we see the dynamic of Latin America, we're going to go there and just see what happens?
Income inequality is something to be very mindful of. In the last World Economic Forum, this was one of the main issues that was discussed. But interestingly, it was discussed more in the context of the growing gap, income inequality in developed markets as a result of the global financial crisis. When you look at emerging markets, you actually see a lot of progress closing the gap of income inequality. In India, you had the poverty level reduce from about 37% of the population in 2004 to about 22% of the population in 2011.
That's incredible.
That's very big.
That's very fast.
From 37 to 22%, right? In Brazil, you've also seen improvements in closing the inequality gap. Now, that doesn't mean that we're even nearly where we should be, because these countries had huge inequality gaps.
Sure,
okay?
Absolutely.
But it's going in the right direction. And it's going in the right direction by virtue of the work and development that's happening in the private sector and in growing the middle class and growing sort of that average income level of the lower income population. The opportunity that offers to investors is really to work with the private sector that is very conscious of the need to maintain stability or stabilize economies. And what they are looking to do in the private equity space is build companies, start new companies, hire the local labor force, train the local labor force, build companies that are going to serve these domestic markets. And I think this is where investors, whether they're local investors, regional investors, or international investors, have opportunities to support good companies working with good partners, making investments in these markets.
And when you're looking at these organizations, I've been in 82 countries now. You go in, like I was recently in Brazil, and you go into favelas, and these are the squatter camps coming in. But what you're seeing is that now these the old tin shacks and all that, in some cases, are going away. Now they're permanent structures. People's homes are getting larger. They're now having cars, and they're setting up small businesses. As you go up and down the hills, you see this in most of the cities in India now, happening all around the suburban areas of, say, China, South Africa. So looking at this, people wanting more space, they want to be more seen as part of the middle class. How is that driving the desire, the appetite to bring more investors into the marketplace?
So I think this, I guess you can call it the emerging consumer in emerging markets, is really demanding all kinds of products and services, from housing to healthcare to education to basic foods. And in emerging markets, for the most part, they're businesses that are relatively simple businesses. This is not high-tech venture capital. This is just, I always call it basic businesses. And what they need is human capital, right? And they need equity capital. In many of these economies, there's not a whole lot of lending happening. Banks don't normally lend to the private sector, do a lot of consumer lending. You do have the microfinance institutions that help the sort of lower income. But lending is not as prevalent as it is in the US, for example. So even companies that want to grow don't go to the bank and are able to get, a 5-year loan to be able to, get their company off the ground. They need equity capital, right? And so the private equity industry plays in emerging markets a very developmental role when they invest to support and build companies in these emerging and frontier markets.
Well, it's really interesting to look at, say, India or a Kenya or even a place like Guatemala, Honduras, and places like that, how you're taking these consumer products, they're downsizing these things. So you take a huge bottle that we'd have in the United States, it's 22 ounces of shampoo or something, and they're selling the little sachets so people can have it. And the cell phones where you'll have one primarily women in the local marketplace will actually buy a phone. She has the charger and then rents it out to number of families around her. So looking at that, I mean, these are very small things. We don't really think of them as being businesses, but in these small communities, these are very powerful organs and generators as far as future wealth and growth, so they can invest in their education, healthcare, and all that. So how do your investors, how do you whet that appetite to look at in India, where you have still a mass of people that are trying to aspire to, have, shampoo, to have daily soap and these kinds of things, because this is where the new markets really are emerging.
In emerging markets, I think you have so many different levels of businesses, and as you pointed out, there's so many micro businesses that are growing and that are growing very fast, and that are entering the formal sector. A lot of these businesses are pretty informal, so they're difficult for investors like ourselves or international investors to put money to work with those small informal companies. But they're growing into the formal sector. And so once one of these small companies enters the formal sector and is now becoming a small to mid-sized company, this is where we like to look, right? Because these companies, the mid-sized companies, are really the fastest growing companies in emerging markets. And they're across multiple sectors, right? So, it may be a supermarket chain, it may be, a healthcare clinic, it might be a cell phone is a huge example, of course, of a transformational industry.
Right.
But, basic banking services. I mean, there are all kinds of things that we take for granted in the developed markets that barely exist or are just getting going in emerging markets.
Yeah, and it's really exciting what's going on, and I think it's through AvanzCapital, you're really on to something, because you're really fostering, the dynamics of all these new societies. And when you take, there's maybe 50 among the world's population, of the countries, and now you have almost 100 joining. It's exciting as we create the Emerald Planet.
Just books at the library.
There's more than just books at the library.
Excuse me.
There's more than just books at the library.
Il y a plus que de livres à la bibliothèque.
Hello. You have a lot of great books here today. There's more than just books at the library.
I know.
There's more than just books at the library.
I don't want to be hooked to a machine.
I want all the medical treatment available to me.
I wouldn't want my family to have to make this decision.
My doctor knows what's best for me.
An advance directive is your life on your terms. Talk with your family. Decide what's right for you. Then put it in writing.
Documenting my wishes today means my family won't have to make heart-wrenching decisions later.
To learn more, visit www.putitinwriting.org.
1,200 American youth run away from their homes every day. The National Runaway Switchboard is here to help. 1-800-RUNAWAY. If you are a runaway, thinking about running away from home, or a parent or guardian concerned about issues facing your child, call us 24 hours a day. 1-800-RUNAWAY. In times of crisis, hope is just a phone call away. 1-800.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations looking for those products, the services, and the people that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we look into these emerging markets, some 100 plus of these, is how are we going to be able to take care of the new population, some 2 billion souls. They're going to be joining us on the planet, and as we know, over half of those are going to be females. And so how do we involve, engage, and encourage and foster females to become more involved in what's going on? And really, it's not more involved as females become, over 50% of the population, but to allow them to provide the full leadership and also the dynamics to society that they're really entitled to. And we have someone who's engaging about 100 million or so, more than that, maybe 1 billion of these people. This is Dr. Paula in Fellingham. She is the founder and CEO of the Women's Information Network. It's called the WIN. We met through CEO Space out in Nevada. And I have right beside me Haydee, Celaya, who is the co-founder of AvanzCapital. And she's here in case we lose Paula by Skype. And Haydee and I will just continue right on chatting till we get Paula back. But Paula, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV.
Thank you so much. It's delightful to be here. Thanks, Dr. Sam.
You're doing fantastic work, and I was getting these numbers, and I think your claim is it's about 1 billion women. Is that how many you're reaching now?
First time. Our email list is a little over 100 million.
Okay. Well, that's still a fantastic start.
We have women in 152 countries, and that in large part is because we put on, for the 100th anniversary of International Women's Day, which was March 8, 2011, we put on 377 live events in 152 countries. And before I go on, I wanted to applaud Haydee Celaya, am I saying that correctly, of the AvanzCapital. Just magnificent. She just did a couple of segments that I watched and thoroughly enjoyed, and I applaud the work that you're doing.
Well, she was actually at our Rotary Club, and a few weeks after that, people are still talking about her presentation. So she really reaches out, engages people, but it's just like what you're doing, Paula, is you're reaching into society. As you know, the United States now is about 54% female part of the population. The men are becoming the mass minority here. But when you look at these 154 nations you're working in, you know, it's just an explosion as far as women-owned businesses, women that are going into positions in higher education and all types of social engagement, social development. So you're really at the sector
right.
that's you're moving forward.
Right on. And Haydee knows that there is a beautiful, what I call a rising and an awakening of the women of the world. That's very fast moving, very far reaching, and it's permeated every country. It really has. And these women are squaring their shoulders and lifting their chins and saying, we can do this in a way that they never have before.
Well, looking at what you're doing as far as, the WIN is for global education, networking, and all that. So tell us about this orientation and creating this, with an international flair and focus from the very beginning.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, I've had some magnificent global opportunities, and from the beginning, I knew that we needed to reach out and touch the hearts and change the lives of women worldwide. Our mission is to strengthen women and families worldwide through education, enlightenment, and to me that's having a serving heart, and entrepreneurship in an effort to eradicate illiteracy, poverty, and hunger, and to increase the level of love, prosperity, and peace on earth. So that's the big mission, and the short motto is, we are women helping women live our best lives. And we do that in two ways. We do it online, and we do it on land. So is it all right, Dr. Sam, if I tell about our global initiative, which is on our on-land, beautiful, huge, massive project?
Of course. Let's go ahead and move right into that. And what I want to do as we're doing that is tying the women, of course, which are, you know, this new engine, the dynamic in these various societies, but bringing the children forward. So again, it's not like, you know, they're out of sight, you don't hear them, but, you know, children being engaged at the same time you're engaging the females.
Well, I'm glad you bring up children. I actually have 8 children. And I have 23 grandchildren right now. And before I started the WIN, then I wrote 4 parenting books. So I care a lot about the children. Yes, absolutely. And we know, and Haydee knows this too, that as the women are educated, of course you're educating whole generations of people. And so what I love is that the women are ready like never before to be educated, and as they are, then they move out of survival mode up into self-development, and then up to, of course, self-mastery. We're always all working on that. And then to that highest place where we all want to live, which is selfless service. And I love that the women are on that moving. And what makes it? It's education. It's the key to going from survival mode up into self-development, which of course, then when they start learning more about how they can improve their lives and the lives of their families, then a natural consequence is for them to want to start a business and want to contribute financially, whether they start a business or work for a corporation, but contribute financially to the well-being of their family.
Well,
what we are doing is this global initiative, and what we're putting on are live events in every country, and it's called they're called Global Women's Summits. We are putting on 70 live Global Women's Summits internationally this year, just 2014. And as we do, we always get women who raise their hands and say, I want to be part of this. And because it's an actual template that the women actually make money putting these on, but to be able to put these on in all the different countries and then teach these life-changing principles of entrepreneurship and health and nutrition and all the things that we teach. And the most important thing about this initiative is we are asking all the women at every one of these 1,000 events the same 3 questions. And then I'm hoping to stand at the floor of the United Nations, and I've had some wonderful opportunities there already. But to be able to say, we know what the women of the world want because we just ask them in person, physically, with them, in their languages, teaching them from our hearts. So Haydee, you and I probably have a wonderful conversation to have at some point this next week.
Well, looking at all of this, and I know you're talking about these events are going on around the globe, but what you're really doing, Paula, is you're empowering people at every level of society, you know, in the home to start with, of course, and then to the local level, and then to the regions, the districts, and then, of course, at the national level, and then, of course, the international level. So looking at that, what types of skills are coming through the education through the WIN, because I know education is a real thrust that goes to the heart of this urbanization, climate change, and a global economy.
And I love that you asked that, because you can't just put on an event that day. They're feeling empowered and they're so excited, but then what happens the next Thursday when they still want to be a better mother, they want to start the business or lose the weight or whatever it is that woman wants. So we created 8 programs, and they all come with books and CDs and DVDs and guidebooks and being translated now in different languages. And these programs will help them in every part of their lives. So we have solutions for families. We have one that helps them with their finances, helps them with their health and their nutrition, one that helps them with their beauty. It's called Be As Beautiful on the Outside as You Are on the Inside, because women care about that. And we have one that's for women who don't want to start a business, but they're maybe sad to the core. They're lonely. And it's called Women Celebrating Life. And it's a monthly support group that we're trying to grab hold and help women all over the world. And in Spanish, I love it in Spanish, it's Mujeres Celebrando la Vida. And you know, but it's a marvelous
That
program.
is very beautiful.
All these beautiful programs then that we say here. And everything we do is either no cost or very low cost.
Well,
because of our mission.
Yeah, looking at what you're doing, and of course, Haydee and I were talking, and you overheard this as far as the emerging middle class in all these various nations around the globe. And actually, there's about 125 of these new nations that are moving towards middle class, emerging class status. And when you look at it, all these various topics that you're talking about, 10 or 15 years ago, people would say, you know, we're not going to be talking about these kinds of things. But now, because you have so many women moving, you know, really to the middle class, all of this becomes relevant. So looking at the time that when you started the WIN, the Women's International Network, to now.
Women's Information Network.
Right.
International is another group.
But the whole thing is that as they're moving towards this way, what are the real dynamics that you've seen changing as far as where these women want to go and what they're willing to do for themselves to bring about a better society within their own country?
Yes, oh, that's true. The gaps are closing. At the very beginning, when I first went to India, and this was years and years and years ago, and Haydee mentioned India, but this next year we'll be putting on a Global Women's Summit in Bangalore and Mumbai and Hyderabad and Delhi, and I love the women in India. Well, I love the women in all the countries, but I have a special place in my heart because what these women, they're so brave, and it's, well, you know, that disqualifies others. They're all brave, but what I've learned about India, when I first started working with them, there really was the have and the have-nots, and it was a huge gap in between. And more of these women, and what I love also is that the haves are reaching down and helping lift the women. Yes, and the women who are becoming more and more educated are becoming more confident, and in that confidence, and then, you know, becoming more educated, starting their business, then there's a joy. There's a joy in India in these years, just even the last 2 years, that and a hopefulness that really didn't exist in the uneducated.
Paula, we're going to be losing you about this very second, so we'll be back to you. But Dr. Paula in Fellingham, who is the founder, CEO of the Women's Information Network called the WIN, is talking about how to raise the aspirations, but at the same time the skill levels as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
Osama bin Laden calls getting nuclear weapons a religious duty.
Today, materials that can be used to make nuclear weapons are stored in more than 40 countries.
Sometimes protected by just a chain link fence.
Yet not enough is being done to lock down these materials
before terrorists steal them. Why did we learn all this?
My mother,
My son,
my sister-in-law,
were all murdered September 11th.
Help protect America.
Together we can.
Please join us.
The stem cell issue is being debated throughout the country. Truth is, most everyone has an opinion, even if they don't know the facts.
Let's stop arguing and start really understanding the potential of stem cell research.
For us and for millions of Americans living with disabilities, get the facts.
Call 1-877-842-3442 for free information from the Stem Cell Research Foundation. That's 1-877-842-3442.
Following the tragic events of September 11th, there have been hundreds of violent attacks against innocent Americans.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
Remember, please stop the hate.
We're stronger when we are united.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
One nation under God.
Indivisible.
With liberty
and justice
for all.
In America, there's either room for everyone or it's not America.
Don't pick the wrong fight.
Let's keep America land of the free.
Stop the hate.
Planning a home renovation? Put this at the top of your to-do list. Because after 10 years, none of you are protected against tetanus and another potentially fatal disease, diphtheria. A minor injury, such as a cut or a scrape, can put you at risk for a tetanus infection. And while safety gear offers some protection, an up-to-date vaccination called the TD booster is the best insurance against tetanus. So get the TD booster. If it's been 10, do it again.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the President, Executive Director of Emerald Planet and the Director and host of the Emerald Planet TV. We come to you on a weekly basis looking around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are going to take us through the 21st century. And as we move towards 2050, and we're adding 2 billion new souls to the planet, at the same time we have an 80% urbanization. Yes, 80% urbanization. And many people look at the nations that are moving forward, like a Brazil, and think of these vast open areas, Amazon and all that, and yet it's already 87% urbanization. People living in urban areas in Brazil. The United States now is over 80%. Think of the vast lands. And so the dynamic, the change is really happening. At the same time, the majority of the population in many of these countries actually are females. And we have someone who is a constant joy in all this. Her name is Dr. Paula in Fellingham. She is the founder and CEO of the Women's Information Network, the WIN. And I have right beside me Haydee, Celaya, who is co-founder of AvanzCapital. She's going to be here as Skype backup in case we lose Paula. And we'll just keep chatting away until we get Paula back. But Paula, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you so much. It's my honor to be here. Appreciate it. And I just love what Haydee's doing. I applaud you for the good work you're doing.
Thank you, and ditto to you.
Yeah, it's fantastic. We have a mutual admiration society going on here. But guess what?
Women do this, Dr. Sam.
Well, the whole thing about it's being replicated in millions of places all over the planet simultaneously, and it's the two of you that are helping to bring that about. But the Women's International Network, tell us a little bit about that. And what are some of the major achievements that you've been able to bring about since you actually started the WIN?
I appreciate that. It's the Women's Information Network. I have a friend who has the Women's International Network.
Well, you need to get together and bring them together.
The network is thewinonline.com. And one of the things we've done, and thank you for asking, Dr. Sam, is that we helped host the largest gathering of women in the history of the planet for International Women's Day on its 100th anniversary, which was March 8, 2011. And it's a magnificent holiday. And I actually own internationalwomensday.org, and anyone can find it by just Googling International Women's Day. But International Women's Day is a magnificent holiday that celebrates women. So we put up 196 pages and went out to the women of the world and said, you want to play? You want to participate in putting on a wonderful celebration? And as it turns out, then we helped and collaborated with women to put on 377 live events in 152 countries. Wow. So that was thrilling. And now we're putting on 1,000 live events worldwide from 2011 now through 2018. They're called Global Women's Summits. And it's a magnificent opportunity. These are 2-day events and if anyone's listening who would like to know more about that, just go to thewinonline.com and click on Global Women's Summits. And it tells all about how you could participate in this magnificent, life-strengthening event, life-changing, really.
Well, I think it's absolutely fantastic of what you're doing, and this emphasizing the information, the international, and tying into urbanization, global economy, and climate change, which is what the theme of this whole thing is. We've had 6,000 plus years of societal development. A lot of that was in urban areas. But really through the win, you're actually increasing the speed, the dynamics of this change that's going on in the planet. So how are you actually fostering and increasing the communications among women around the globe?
Wow, that's wonderful. You just led right into what I wanted to share also. Besides our on-land events, we have, what we just launched is eTV for women. Now, this is the opportunity then that women who are experts have to share their videos on a weekly basis. So we have 30 channels, 30 topics. So health and fitness and finance and parenting and self-development, careers, 30. And then we'll have 30 experts in the United States. So that's 900 women sending us weekly videos. We just launched this 3 weeks ago, but prior to that, I had hundreds and hundreds of experts sharing audio. So we took down the audio, and we're doing just what you're doing, Dr. Sam, because video is so dynamic and relevant. And then we will go into the different countries where they have their experts in finance or whatever it is, and they want to speak in accordance, of course, in congruence with their culture and norms, and of course in their language. So we'll have 900 experts in every single country, and we're already in 152. So if we go to the ones where we already are, that's 152 countries times 900 women sending in weekly videos that share their expertise, and it's free. It's absolutely free for the people who are accessing it. And hopefully we'll be able to touch hearts and change lives even faster.
Well, the whole thing about it is this acceleration as you bring more people into it, and they have this collaborative spirit, and whether it's in the Middle East or Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, you know, people really do want to collaborate, they want to share. So this is a fantastic platform that you're doing, both this online, on-ground concept that you have. So looking at this, how are you involving the children in this, and how are you engaging and encouraging the children to, you know, follow, you know, their mothers and the females in their households to be engaged at the same way?
Well, Dr. Schweitzer actually said a quote that I've shared for decades, and I love being able to say that, decades. I'm 65, and I have 8 children and 23 grandchildren. And he said there are 3 ways to teach a child. The first is by example, the second is by example, and the third is by example, as we teach those mothers. Now let me talk about our young women. One of the things that we are going to do, just a little more funding, what we're going to do is be able to have experts go into the women's services departments and divisions of every university, not just in the US, but in every country, and help them know, creating awareness, first of all, of what we're doing, sharing our programs, which are strengthening in we have 8 different programs, which strengthen them in every area of their life, personally, in their families, and in their businesses. And so then being able to share these programs and having the women, these young women who are so bright and so vibrant and so enthusiastic and ready to really, let's go change the world. Well, let's say, we can help you. You come and help us put on these Global Women's Summits. You have a channel, a youth channel, where you're sharing your insights. These are such amazing young women, and having them step up and be the leaders of their generation. And they're capable, and we have the platform. We just need to communicate with them and let this become more well known.
Well, I think what you're doing, and with your enthusiasm and dynamic, they're certainly going to know about it. So, and we're working with you, as you know, for these years, and also CEO Space is very supportive of what you're doing, who you are. But I know that you're going to all ages as far as the females are concerned. You have what you call thought leaders. And you're training and engaging and fostering and providing the information that they need to do all of this. So what is a thought leader, and what's the dynamic of encouraging and evolving more thought leaders?
I love that question. Thought leaders, in my mind, and there could be many different definitions, but my mind, a thought leader is someone who is on the cutting edge of their industry, that are thinking new thoughts, that are out there really making a change. And that's not to, you know, we talk about that a lot. but truly being a leader. That when you're doing something that no one else is doing and you have the ability to influence many others, and you are thinking thoughts and creating programs and having new ideas that have, maybe they've been thought of before, where you're taking action and really taking initiative. And I love that word collaboration. I actually wrote an article that's been published in 6 different magazines on this. And I must talk about this because this is the key, that if you're a thought leader and you don't know how to collaborate, really, you're just not going to be ever as effective. But I believe that collaboration is the key to success and actually to world peace. And let me explain why. All these many centuries, we've had the domination model, nation over nation, trying to religion over religion, man over woman, woman trying to be over man. What we need to understand is a better model, and not just understand it, implement it, live it in our very thoughts that we think. How can I serve him? How can I serve her? How can we create a mutually beneficial relationship? It's based on trust. The other was based on how can I get more of what I need? And this is based on how can I serve you? How can I help you? How can I create this increase in love and productivity, prosperity, peace on earth? If that's uppermost in your mind, then when you have that conversation with that individual, with that corporation, with that organization, you'll always be asking, how can I serve you? That, my friend, is a real leader. And those type of people will surge forward. They'll catapult forward in the 21st century. And those
Paula, we're going to have to get out of here in just a minute. So,
way to go, Paula.
Anyway, there's a Japanese organization, PHP, which is Peace, Health, and Prosperity, and this is much of what you're talking about. But we really have about 30 seconds. So I'm going to hold you to it. So the whole thing about where are we going, with the win over the next, say, 10, 15, 20 years as we move towards 2050?
Well, fulfilling the mission to strengthen women and families worldwide through education, enlightenment, and entrepreneurship in an effort to eradicate illiteracy, poverty, and hunger, and to increase the level of love, prosperity, and peace on earth. So I encourage them to go to has to have the win, W-I-N, and then another word, online, thewinonline.com.
Well, I tell you, it's absolutely fantastic. And Paula, thank you for being with us. This is Dr. Paula Fellingham, founder and CEO of the Women's Information Network, The Win, and Haydee Celaya, co-founder of the AvanzCapital, sitting right beside me. And Paula, thank you for being with us. And Haydee, thank you for being with us and allowing us to share. And it's amazing the balance between the two of you. And as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States, we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.